Angles of elevation and depression are different words we use to describe angles in diagrams. And it mostly refers to you applying angles into real life situations. So they're not actually confusing if you follow the basic procedure regarding the construction of the angles. So if you're given a description, for example, and it tells you something, 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 Alan is viewing something at an angle of elevation of such. So you're describing what we call the viewer here. And let's say he's looking at a tree, so the tree is the object. And he's looking at it from an angle of elevation. Sometimes it's easier to describe the angles using the words elevation and depression, which is why we use them. So the first thing to do is to construct your diagram. So first you have Alan, who is your viewer, and he's looking at the, let's say, the top of the tree. So let's say this is the tree. Okay, they could specify that the tree is to the right or to the left, it doesn't matter. So this is where he's looking at. This is his target, this is the object. So the way to find this angle is to start the construction. So the most basic way of, the first step to do to identify where the angle is to draw a horizontal line. So what I'm going to do is just draw a horizontal line from the viewer towards the object. So not a diagonal line and not a vertical line. You're just going to draw a horizontal line towards your object. So this is my horizontal line. So just straight. And then depending on what you have, in this case we have an angle of elevation. So elevation is you looking up. So my horizontal has to go upwards towards my object. And this is, so this is my straight line up. And let's assume this dot is right here. So what you've created now is a 90 degrees, which is what we want for our construction, because then I can now close this construction to create my right angle triangle. So I can just close this construction, and this line is called the line of sight. So not all books use this identification, but you can. So line of sight. This is your horizontal, this is your vertical going up towards your object because it's an angle of elevation. Now, where is this angle now? Okay, so I've done the construction, I've gone up because it's elevation, but where is the angle? This is the angle of elevation. So this is the angle of, if it's given, for example, as 56 degrees, then you write 56. Or if they're asking you to find the angle of elevation, then this is the x that you need to, so this is the unknown angle x that you need to find, for example, or alpha. So the angle is going to be right where your viewer is. So this is where your angle is going to be. Now, what if you have an angle of depression? It's exactly the same thing, but instead of going upwards, you're going to go downwards. So let's say you are standing on top of a cliff. So these are usually the typical examples they use, and you're viewing a boat. Okay, so this is your boat, and you're viewing the, let's say the top of the boat. Okay, so this is your view. So you are the viewer, and then you have the object here. So we use the same exact steps. And let's say you are looking at the top of the boat with an angle of depression 68 degrees. Just random numbers in there. So if I'm going to construct my line, you start, as I mentioned, with a horizontal. So you're just going to go, okay, you're just going to go straight until you get to your object. So this is where my object is, and because it's an angle of depression, I won't go up like I did before. I'm gonna go down towards my object, so this is vertically down, and hence I've created my 90 degrees here, and then I'm going to close my construction with the line of sight, and that's going to give me my triangle. So now I have a right angle triangle, and the angle of depression is at the viewer, remember. So this is your angle of depression, and this is 68 degrees. Okay, so you have your construction here. Now, once you have your right angle triangle, you can use Pythagoras, you can use the trig ratios. Because you have degrees in there, you will probably use the trigonometric ratios to find any of the missing lengths that you need. So just one more point is that sometimes we have different forms of angles of elevation and depression. So let's say, for example, you have let's say you are on a boat and you are viewing the top of a building, okay? And the construction they've given you in the question is something like this. So they've already drawn a triangle for you, okay? And they tell you where is the angle of elevation from the boat. Doesn't make this. Let's say this is a cliff, not a building. From boat to cliff is 48 degrees. Okay, so you need to identify the angle. So this is sometimes an exercise they'd expect you to do, identify the angle. Now, if it was a written exam, then you can construct a different triangle, because I haven't explained anything about going up and horizontal. I've explained about going horizontal and then up. So you can use a different construction. So I'm gonna do it with green just to show you. So as I said, you go horizontal towards your object, and then because it's an angle of elevation, then you have to go upwards, and then I'm going to close my triangle, and this will be my angle of elevation, so that's my 48, and this is my 90 degrees. But if you don't want to do an additional construction, there is another way of identifying the angle of elevation. If you remember how alternate angles work, so if you have two parallel lines, and another line in there, then you can create this Z shape where the angles inside, so this angle and this angle, would be equal. So they'd be the exact same angles. And we can do the same things with angles of elevation and depression. So if I identify these two as my horizontal lines, then these two angles, so if this was my angle of elevation here, then this would also be my angle of elevation. So another way, if you don't want to do this additional construction and you want to use the triangle that they've given to you already, then you can just immediately say, well, this is the angle of elevation, but only use this technique if you're comfortable with it. And once you've actually found the original angle of elevation, and then do the alternate construction to find the other angle of elevation. So this is just additional to know the different forms. And then it's similar for angle of depression. If you are looking down at an object and the triangle they've constructed is such, then you can form your different triangle. Can go horizontal and then straight down, and then we said this would be the angle of depression, but based on the alternate angle theorem, so I can look at this, and I can use the original construction given in the question and say that this is also the angle of depression. So just something extra for you to use.